The massive space station hung in the void like a metal city among the stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its many ports, bringing representatives from across the galaxy to this one place. The Galactic Council Station was bigger than most moons, its twisted spires and gleaming domes housing the seat of power for known space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the UES Liberty, watching the station grow larger as they approached. The human ship looked small next to the alien vessels surrounding them. Crystalline ships that sparkled like diamonds floated beside organic vessels that looked more grown than built. Metal warships with sharp edges and glowing weapon systems moved in perfect formation around the station's outer defenses. Beside Morrison, Ambassador Lisa Carter checked her notes one more time. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style that matched her formal diplomatic uniform. She had been chosen for this mission because she never backed down from a fight, and everyone on Earth knew they were heading into the biggest fight humanity had ever faced. "They want us to pay tribute like every other species before us," Carter said quietly, not taking her eyes off her tablet. 40% of our industrial output, 60% of our rare minerals, and 30,000 of our brightest young people every year? Morrison's jaw tightened. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Navy, fighting pirates and defending colonies. He knew what those numbers meant. "That would destroy us," he said. "We'd never recover from losing that much." Carter nodded. "That's the point. They don't want new species to get strong enough to challenge the old ones. Every race that joins, the Council has to give up their future to get protection and trade rights." The shuttle bay doors opened with a soft hiss, and Lieutenant Don Tucker appeared in the doorway. He was young but sharp, chosen for this mission because he could think fast under pressure. "Ambassador, we're being hailed by the station. They want us to dock in Bay 7 and report to the Council chambers within 2 hours." Carter stood and smoothed her uniform. "Time to meet our new neighbors." The docking process took 30 minutes. As their shuttle moved through the station's massive bay doors, Carter could see the sheer scale of the place. The docking bay alone was larger than any building on Earth. Hundreds of different ships sat in neat rows, their alien designs showing the diversity of species that made up the Council. When they stepped off the shuttle, the first thing that hit them was the smell. The station's air recycling systems were working overtime to accommodate dozens of different atmospheric requirements. The result was a strange mix of ozone, sulfur, and something that reminded Carter of flowers, mixed with engine oil. Chairman Vexstar was waiting for them at the arrival gate. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his blue chitinous skin gleaming under the station's lights. 4 arms moved in complex patterns as he spoke, while a small device attached to his throat translated his clicking speech into words the humans could understand. "Ambassador Carter," his translator said in a flat mechanical voice, "welcome to the Council Station. Your species has attracted considerable attention in recent months." Carter extended her hand in the human greeting gesture, but Vexstar simply stared at it for a moment before continuing. "Your rapid expansion beyond your home system has been noted by the senior members of the Council. Such growth requires proper guidance." "We appreciate the Council's interest," Carter replied diplomatically. "Humanity looks forward to finding our place among the galactic community." Vexstar's compound eyes reflected the station's lights as he studied her. "Indeed, come, the Council chamber awaits." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered in patterns and symbols from different alien cultures, creating a patchwork of galactic civilization. Other beings moved through the halls around them, some floating in mechanical devices, others walking on legs that numbered anywhere from 2 to 8. Tucker stayed close to Morrison, his hand never far from the recording device on his belt. Everything they saw and heard would need to be reported back to Earth. The folks back home needed to know exactly what humanity was dealing with. "The Council has maintained peace for 300 years, Vexstar explained as they walked. "This has been achieved through careful management of resources and populations. Each species contributes according to their abilities and receives protection and guidance in return. And what happens to species that don't want to contribute? Carter asked. Vextar's forearms paused their constant motion for just a moment. Such situations have not arisen. All species recognize the benefits of council membership. Carter and Morrison exchanged glances. The unspoken message was clear. No one had ever said no because no one had been strong enough to survive saying no. They entered a large antechamber filled with representatives from different species. Carter counted at least 20 different types of beings, each stranger than the last. Some looked almost human except for odd-colored skin or extra limbs. Others were so alien that she couldn't tell which end was the head. The council will convene. In 1 hour, Vextar announced. You may use this time to prepare your responses to the integration proposal. He handed Carter a datapad covered in alien symbols. When she touched the screen, it shifted to display text in English. As she read, her face grew pale. The tribute demands were even worse than Earth's intelligence services had estimated. In addition to the resources and people, humanity would be required to share all technological advances with the Council. Any military vessel larger than a patrol boat would need Council approval before construction. Human colonies could only be established in systems approved by the senior species, Morrison read over her shoulder, his military training helping him understand the strategic implications immediately. They want to turn us into a client state, he whispered. Worse than that, Carter replied quietly. They want to make sure we never grow strong enough to have a choice about being a client state. Around them, other species were having their own conversations in languages the human translators couldn't process. But Carter noticed something interesting. Many of the junior species representatives looked tired, almost defeated. These weren't the faces of beings who were happy with their situation. Tucker appeared at her elbow. Ambassador, I've been listening to the other delegations. The Kaleri representative over there mentioned something about mining quotas being increased again. The Northern delegate was complaining about research restrictions. Carter nodded slowly. The picture was becoming clearer. The Council's tribute system wasn't just about preventing war. It was about preventing progress. The senior species had created a system where they stayed on top by making sure no one else could climb high enough to challenge them. Ma'am, Tucker continued, there's something else. I intercepted a communication between the Zolarian and Hegemony delegations. They're planning to make an example of us. They think if they crush humanity's spirit early, other species won't get ideas about resistance. Morrison's hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm before he remembered where they were. How many ships do they have positioned around the station? Enough to turn our entire fleet into scrap metal, Tucker replied grimly. Carter closed the datapad and looked around the antechamber one more time. Every species here had faced the same choice humanity was about to face. Every single one had chosen survival over freedom. She couldn't blame them. The alternative was extinction, but as she thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had fought and died throughout history for the simple right to determine their own fate, she realized that some choices were worth the risk. Ambassador, Morrison said quietly, what are you thinking? Carter smiled, and it was the same smile her grandfather had worn when he enlisted to fight in World War II. I'm thinking that we didn't come this far just to hand over our future to a bunch of galactic bullies. A chime echoed through the antechamber, and Vextar S. followed. The council will now convene. All delegations please proceed to the main chamber. As they walked toward the massive doors that led to the council chamber, Carter felt the weight of human history on her shoulders. In a few minutes, she would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and give them humanity's answer. She just hoped it would be an answer the galaxy was ready to hear. The council chamber was enormous, built in a perfect circle with seats arranged in rising tiers that reached toward a domed ceiling painted with star maps from 100 different worlds. Representatives from 47 species filled the seats, their various forms creating a bizarre display of galactic diversity. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert dozens of languages into something resembling communication. Carter walked into the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Morrison and Tucker took their assigned seats in the human delegation section, a small area that felt insignificant compared to the massive sections allocated to the senior species. The Zilarian Empire occupied an entire quarter of the chamber, their blue chitinous forms clicking and hissing in their complex language. The crystalline hegemony held an equally impressive section, their geometric bodies refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. Chairman Vextar rose from his elevated platform, his forearms moving in ceremonial gestures that had been performed at the beginning of council sessions for 3 centuries. We gather today to welcome humanity into the galactic community and to establish the terms of their integration into our established order. His words carried the weight of ritual, as if this ceremony had been performed so many times that the outcome was never in doubt. Carter noticed that none of the other species representatives seemed particularly interested in the proceedings. They had seen this before many times. For 300 years, Vextar continued, the tribute system has maintained peace and stability across known space. New species contribute their resources and talents to the greater good, while established civilizations provide protection and guidance. This system has prevented the galactic wars that once threatened to destroy all life among the stars. Carter listened carefully, but her attention was drawn to the junior species representatives. The Kalari delegate sat with her, scaled shoulders slumped in resignation. The Northern representative stared at his hands, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The Vorthak delegate's tentacles hung limp at his sides, showing what Carter's briefings had told her was a sign of defeat among his people. Supreme Arbiter Tholanex of the crystalline hegemony rose from his geometric throne, his crystal body shifting through colors that indicated he was about to make an important announcement. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the chamber like musical chimes, but the translation made his words sound cold and mechanical. The tribute assessment for humanity has been calculated based on extensive analysis of your species' capabilities and potential, Tholanex announced. Your rapid technological advancement and territorial expansion have been noted and evaluated by our most skilled economists and strategists. A holographic display materialized above the chamber's center, showing detailed charts and graphs of human civilization. Carter saw Earth's industrial centers, mining operations, universities, and population centers all mapped out in precise detail. The Council had been watching humanity far longer than anyone on Earth had realized. The required annual tribute from Earth and all human colonies will be as follows. Tholanex continued, his crystal form pulsing with each point. 40% of all industrial production will be transferred to designated Council distribution centers. This includes manufactured goods, processed materials, and technological components. Carter felt her stomach drop. 40% of industrial output would collapse Earth's economy within a year. Entire sectors would shut down, unemployment would skyrocket, and the carefully balanced supply chains that kept human civilization running would crumble. 60% of all rare earth elements and strategic minerals will be allocated to senior council members according to established distribution protocols, the Arbiter continued. This includes but is not limited to lithium, platinum, uranium, and the recently discovered quantum crystals from your outer colonies. Morrison's hands clenched into fists as he listened. The quantum crystals were the key to humanity's newest propulsion systems, the technology that had allowed them to expand beyond their home system so quickly. Without those minerals, human expansion would stop completely. Finally, Tholanex said, his form shifting to a deeper blue that indicated satisfaction, 30,000 of your most intellectually gifted individuals between the ages of 18 and 25 will be selected annually for service in Council research facilities. These individuals will receive the finest education available in the galaxy and will contribute to projects that benefit all member species. The chamber fell silent except for the constant hum of life support systems and translation devices. Carter stared at the holographic display, watching as it showed human colonies being stripped of their resources and Earth's brightest young minds being shipped off to serve alien masters, Tucker leaned forward in his seat, his training as an intelligence officer helping him see the true picture. The tribute wasn't just about resources or even people. It was about breaking humanity's spirit, ensuring that they never developed the confidence or capability to challenge the established order. Chairman Vextar gestured with all four arms, calling attention back to himself. These terms are the result of careful deliberation by the Council's most experienced administrators. They represent not punishment but integration, ensuring that humanity finds its proper place within galactic civilization while contributing to the peace and prosperity of all. Carter noticed how he phrased it. Not their choice of place, but their proper place. The distinction was everything. The wisdom of this system has been proven over 3 centuries, Vextar continued. The Kaleri now provide essential mining services that have eliminated resource conflicts. The northern agricultural colonies feed billions across multiple star systems. The Vorthak bioengineering projects have eliminated disease on dozens of worlds. Each species has found their role, their contribution to the greater good. As he spoke, Carter watched the faces of those species he mentioned. The Kaleri delegate's expression was carefully neutral, but Carter caught a flash of something that might have been anger. The Northern representative's jaw was clenched tight. The Vorthak delegate's tentacles twitched in patterns that Carter's briefings had identified as extreme frustration. They weren't happy contributors to galactic civilization. They were conquered peoples who had learned to hide their resentment behind diplomatic masks. The Council recognizes that this transition may seem overwhelming to a young species, Tholanex added, his crystalline form shifting to what Carter assumed were meant to be soothing colors. Therefore, humanity will be granted the standard deliberation period of 24 hours to formalize acceptance of these terms. Carter almost laughed at the phrase, formalize acceptance. As if there was any real choice involved, Morrison caught her eye from his seat and gave an almost imperceptible nod. He had reached the same conclusion she had. This wasn't negotiation or even diplomacy. This was conquest dressed up in the language of cooperation and mutual benefit. During this deliberation period, Vextar announced, the human delegation will remain on the station as honored guests. Council security will ensure your safety and comfort while you consider the generous terms offered by our civilization. The phrase, honored guests, carried the clear implication that they were actually prisoners, though comfortable ones. Carter had expected this. No species was allowed to leave the station without accepting the tribute terms. The few that had tried to refuse in the past had simply disappeared, their worlds mysteriously suffering accidents or natural disasters that left them too weak to resist integration. Are there any questions regarding these terms? Tholonex asked, though his tone suggested that questions were neither expected nor particularly welcome. Carter stood slowly, feeling the eyes of 47 species upon her. Around the chamber, she could sense the attention of beings who had once faced this same moment, the same choice between submission and destruction. I have one question, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Proceed. Vextar replied, his compound eyes focusing on her with what seemed like mild curiosity. Carter looked around the chamber one more time, taking in the faces of species that had chosen survival over freedom, security over independence. She thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of facing impossible odds and somehow finding a way to win anyway. My question is simple, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. What makes you think we're going to say yes? The chamber erupted in a chaos of alien voices, translation devices struggling to keep up with the sudden flood of communication. Chairman Vextar's forearms gestured frantically for order while Supreme Arbiter Tholonex's crystalline form cycled rapidly through colors that Carter's briefings had never covered. For the first time in 300 years, someone had asked a question that the entire system was designed to make unthinkable. And as the chaos continued around her, Carter realized that the real negotiations were just beginning. The chaos in the chamber continued for several minutes as Representatives from dozens of species tried to process what Carter had just said. Translation devices sparked and overheated as they struggled to convert expressions of shock and disbelief across 47 different languages. Some delegates stood from their seats while others huddled together in urgent conversation. Chairman Vextar slammed his primary hand against the control panel, sending a deep, resonant tone through the chamber that gradually restored order. His compound eyes were fixed on Carter with an intensity that made the air around him seem to vibrate. Ambassador Carter, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. The terms presented are not suggestions or opening positions for negotiation. They are the established protocols for species integration that have maintained galactic peace for 3 centuries. Carter remained standing in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that Morrison recognized from their military academy days. It was the stance she took when she was about to do something that would either be remembered as brilliant or completely insane. "I understood the terms perfectly, Chairman," Carter replied, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive chamber. "What I don't understand is why you think humanity would agree to them." Supreme Arbiter Tholanix shifted through a rapid series of colors that Carter's briefings had identified as extreme agitation mixed with confusion. Every species that has joined the Council has recognized the wisdom of these arrangements. The alternative to integration is isolation, and isolated species do not survive in the modern galaxy. Carter smiled then, and it was a smile that would have been recognized by every human soldier who had ever faced impossible odds. "We've been isolated before. We managed just fine." Morrison felt a surge of pride watching his ambassador stand alone against the combined might of galactic civilization. Behind him, Tucker was already running calculations on his portable device, trying to figure out what resources humanity could count on if they chose to go it alone. The Vorthak representative's tentacles began writhing in agitated patterns as he spoke through his translator. "The human speaks of things she does not understand. The Council's protection extends beyond simple military defense. Trade routes, resource allocation, technological exchange, all of these require Council approval. Without integration, your species will stagnate and eventually collapse." "Our species has been around for less than 100 years in space," Carter replied. "In that time, we've developed faster-than-light travel, established colonies on 37 worlds, and created technologies that your own scientists have admitted show remarkable innovation. We did all of that without Council protection or guidance." She turned slowly to address the entire chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "What exactly are you protecting us from? Because from where I stand, the biggest threat to humanity's future is sitting in this room." The Kaleri representative suddenly stood from her seat, her scaled features showing an expression that Carter hoped was admiration rather than gas indigestion. For a moment, it looked like she might speak, but then her eyes darted to the Zilarian section, and she slowly sat back down. Chairman Vextar's 4 arms moved in sharp, aggressive patterns. "You speak with the arrogance of youth, Ambassador. Your species has existed in space for barely a century. The Zilarian Empire has maintained order for over 2,000 years. The crystalline hegemony has preserved knowledge and culture for even longer. Do you truly believe that humanity, alone, among all species, is exempt from the natural order of galactic civilization?" Carter thought about that question for a moment, considering all the human history she had studied, all the times her species had been told that something was impossible, or that they should accept their place in the natural order of things. "Natural order," she repeated slowly. "Chairman, let me tell you about natural order. For most of human history, the natural order said that people with dark skin were property. The natural order said that women couldn't vote or own land. The natural order said that kings ruled by divine right and common people should accept their station without question." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Every time someone challenged that natural order, they were told the same things you're telling me now. That the system had worked for centuries. That change would bring chaos and destruction. That they should accept their proper place for the good of everyone. Morrison watched the faces around the chamber as Carter spoke. Some of the junior species. Representatives were leaning forward in their seats, hanging on every word. Even some of the senior species seemed to be listening with genuine attention. "You know what we discovered about natural order?" Carter asked. "It's usually just an excuse used by people in power to keep other people from getting power. Real natural order would let the best ideas win, regardless of where they come from." Supreme Arbiter Tholanex's crystalline form shifted to deep red patterns that Carter's briefings had identified as anger. "Your philosophy is naive and dangerous. The tribute system prevents the conflicts that once devastated entire star systems. It ensures that resources are distributed efficiently and that technological advancement proceeds at a manageable pace." Manageable. For who? Carter shot back. "You mentioned that the Kaleri provide mining services and the Northern handle agriculture. What you didn't mention is that both of those species developed innovations that could revolutionize their fields, but they're forbidden from sharing those innovations with anyone except their council masters." She pointed to the Kaleri representative who had gone very still in her seat. "The mining colonies on Keller Prime developed extraction techniques that could increase yields by 300% while reducing environmental damage by 90%. But those techniques belong to the Zilarian Empire now, don't they?" Murmur ran through the chamber as other representatives began whispering among themselves. Carter pressed her advantage. "The Northern agricultural worlds created crop strains that could end food scarcity across dozens of star systems, but they're only allowed to grow enough to meet their tribute quotas. The Vorthek bioengineers developed medical techniques that could extend lifespans across multiple species, but they're classified as council property." Chairman Vextar's compound eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "How did you obtain classified council information?" Carter smiled again. "We asked. Amazing what people will tell you when someone finally bothers to listen to their problems instead of just demanding their tribute." Tucker looked up from his device with surprise on his face. Carter had been conducting her own intelligence operation. During their diplomatic preparations, reaching out to junior species through unofficial channels. She hadn't just come here to negotiate. She had come here to understand exactly how the council system really worked. "The tribute system doesn't prevent conflicts," Carter continued, addressing the entire chamber. "It prevents progress. You've created a galaxy where innovation is stifled, where entire civilizations are reduced to providing raw materials and labor for their betters. That's not peace. That's oppression with better marketing." The chamber had grown completely silent. Now, with only the hum of life support systems audible, Carter could feel the weight of 3 centuries of assumptions being examined under harsh light. "So no," she said finally, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had thought through all the implications and accepted all the risks. "Humanity will not be paying tribute to the Council. We will not cripple our economy to feed your system. We will not sacrifice our brightest minds to maintain your technological advantage. And we will not accept our proper place in your natural order." She paused for a moment, then delivered the word that would echo through galactic history. No, the silence that followed was absolute, as if the entire station had stopped breathing. Carter stood alone in the center of the chamber, facing down the combined power of galactic civilization with nothing but human stubbornness and the unshakable belief that some things were worth fighting for. Chairman Vextar was the first to break the silence, his voice carrying a new edge of barely controlled fury. "And what, Ambassador Carter, do you propose as an alternative to the system that has maintained galactic stability for 3 centuries? Carter's smile widened. "Partnership?" The word partnership hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Council had built over 3 centuries. Carter watched as representatives from dozens of species processed what she had just suggested, their various expressions of confusion and curiosity creating a strange mixture of hope and fear throughout the chamber. Chairman Vextar's compound eyes focused on her with laser intensity. "Partnership implies equality, Ambassador. Your species has been in space for less than a century. The senior members of this council have maintained galactic civilization for millennia. What could humanity possibly offer that would justify such an arrangement? Carter had been waiting for this question. She gestured to Tucker, who activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the chamber with images and data streams. The display showed human colonies, research facilities, and technological innovations that had been developed in just the past 50 years. Innovation, Carter said simply. Real innovation, not just incremental improvements to existing systems. In 50 years, humanity has developed 3 new forms of faster-than-light travel, created self-sustaining atmospheric processors that can terraform dead worlds in decades instead of centuries, and invented medical nanobots that can repair cellular damage at the genetic level. The holographic display shifted to show detailed technical specifications that made several representatives lean forward in their seats. The Vorthek delegates' tentacles began moving in patterns that Carter's briefings had identified as intense interest. Even some of the crystalline hegemony representatives were cycling through colors that indicated curiosity. More importantly, Carter continued, we've done all of this while maintaining individual freedom and encouraging competition between ideas. Our best innovations come from garage inventors and university students, not from centralized research facilities controlled by government bureaucrats. Supreme Arbiter Tholunex's crystalline form shifted through agitated color patterns. Uncontrolled technological development is precisely what the tribute system was designed to prevent. Rapid advancement without proper oversight leads to arms races and eventually to devastating conflicts. Morrison stood from his seat in the human delegation section, his military bearing commanding attention even among aliens who barely understood human body language. With respect, Arbiter, the last major galactic conflict ended over 300 years ago, right around the time your tribute system was established. That suggests the system was created to solve a problem that no longer existed. Tucker activated another section of the holographic display, showing historical data that the Human Intelligence Services had pieced together from various sources. Our analysis indicates that technological advancement across all council species has slowed dramatically since the tribute system was implemented. The average time between major innovations has increased from decades to centuries. The chamber erupted in murmurs and urgent conversations as representatives began discussing the implications among themselves. Carter noticed that the junior species delegates were paying particularly close attention to the human data, while the senior species representatives seemed more concerned with maintaining order in their sections. Chairman Vextar slammed his hand against the control panel again, sending another resonant tone through the chamber. These accusations are inappropriate and irrelevant to the matter at hand. The council session was convened to establish tribute terms for humanity, not to relitigate 3 centuries of proven policy. Carter smiled and nodded respectfully. You're absolutely right, Chairman. Let me be more specific about what humanity is offering. She gestured again, and the holographic display shifted to show detailed partnership proposals that she and her team had developed during their journey to the station. We propose mutual defense agreements based on shared strategic interests rather than tribute relationships. We offer technology exchange programs where innovations are shared freely among all participants. We suggest joint exploration missions to map new star systems and establish colonies that benefit everyone involved. The Kaleri representative suddenly stood from her seat, her scaled features showing determination that surprised everyone in the chamber. The mining colonies of Keller Prime would be interested in discussing such arrangements. Our extraction innovations could benefit multiple species if we were allowed to share them freely. Chairman Vextar's forearms moved in sharp, threatening gestures as he turned toward the Kaleri section. Representative Kaldor, you are out of order. Individual species do not negotiate separate agreements during council integration sessions, but the damage was already done. The Northern representative stood next, followed by delegates from 3 other junior species. Each one expressed interest in the human partnership proposals. and each one was met with increasingly aggressive responses from the senior species representatives. Tucker leaned toward Morrison and whispered urgently, "Admiral, I'm picking up increased military activity outside the station. Zilarium battlecruisers are moving into position around our fleet." Morrison nodded grimly but didn't take his eyes off Carter. She was playing a dangerous game, but it was the only game that might save humanity from 3 centuries of servitude. Supreme. Arbiter Tholanex rose from his geometric throne, his crystalline form cycling through deep red patterns that indicated barely controlled fury. This session has devolved into chaos due to human interference with established protocols. The Council demands an immediate response to the tribute terms presented. Will humanity accept integration into galactic civilization, or will you choose the path of isolation and eventual destruction? Carter looked around the chamber one more time, taking in the faces of beings who had once faced this same ultimatum. But something had changed in the past hour. The junior species representatives were no longer sitting in resigned defeat. They were leaning forward in their seats, watching the confrontation with something that looked suspiciously like hope. "Before I give you our final answer," Carter said, "I'd like to ask the other species representatives a question. How many of you are truly satisfied with the current system? How many of you believe that paying tribute and surrendering your innovations has made your civilization stronger?" The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It carried the weight of unspoken resentments and suppressed dreams that had been building for centuries. Representative Calder of the Calari was the first to speak. "The mining colonies produce resources that could benefit the entire galaxy, but we see none of the profits and have no say in how they are distributed. Our people work in dangerous conditions to meet quotas that increase every year, while our requests for safety improvements are denied as unnecessary expenses." The Northern representative stood next. "Our agricultural innovations could feed billions, but we are forbidden from sharing them with species that desperately need food. Children starve on worlds that we could help while we are required to destroy. Surplus crops to maintain resource scarcity that benefits the senior species." One by one, junior species representatives began voicing complaints that had been suppressed for generations. The Vorthek delegate spoke of medical breakthroughs that were classified as council property. The Draconi representative mentioned artistic and cultural exchanges that were forbidden to prevent junior species from developing too much cultural influence. Chairman Vexstar and Supreme Arbiter Tholanex exchanged glances that needed no translation. The human refusal was doing more than just challenging the tribute system. It was inspiring a galaxy-wide examination of assumptions that had gone unquestioned for 3 centuries. "Enough," Vexstar finally declared, his voice carrying the authority of millennia of unchallenged power. "Ambassador Carter, the Council requires your final answer. Will humanity submit to the established order or face the consequences of defiance?" Carter took a deep breath and thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had fought throughout history for the simple right to determine their own destiny. She thought about her grandfather who had stormed beaches in World War II, about her grandmother who had marched for civil rights, about countless ordinary people who had faced impossible odds and chosen freedom over safety. "Our answer is the same as it was an hour ago," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "No, humanity will not pay tribute. We will not surrender our future to maintain your system. And we will not accept that things have to be the way they've always been." She paused, then delivered the words that would change galactic civilization forever. "But our offer of partnership remains open to any species that wants to try something better." The council chamber had transformed from a place of ceremonial authority into something that resembled a revolution in progress. Representatives from junior species were standing and speaking openly about grievances that had been buried for centuries, while the senior species delegates struggled to maintain control over proceedings that had completely escaped their careful management. Chairman Vexstar's forearms moved in increasingly frantic patterns as he tried to restore order to a session. That was rapidly becoming the most significant challenge to establish galactic authority in 300 years. His compound eyes darted between the human delegation and the growing number of junior species representatives who were voicing support for Carter's partnership proposals. Supreme Arbiter Tholanex had shifted to deep crimson patterns that Carter's briefings had identified as barely controlled rage mixed with something that might have been fear. When he spoke, his crystalline voice carried harmonics that made the chamber's walls vibrate with tension. This session is hereby suspended pending emergency deliberations among the senior council members. Tholanex announced. All delegations will return to their quarters while the council determines appropriate responses to these unprecedented developments. But Representative Caldor of the Calari remained standing, her scaled features showing determination that surprised everyone in the chamber, including herself. With respect, Arbiter, the junior species delegations request permission to continue discussions regarding alternative arrangements for galactic cooperation. The Northern representative stood beside her. The agricultural colonies formally request renegotiation of all existing tribute agreements based on principles of mutual benefit rather than resource extraction. Tucker looked up from his portable device with excitement barely contained in his voice. Ambassador, I'm receiving communications from human colonies across 7 sectors. Word of what's happening here is spreading faster than the council can control it. Colonial governors are reporting that other species are reaching out through unofficial channels to discuss the partnership proposals. Morrison felt a mixture of pride and concern as he watched galactic civilization begin to fracture along lines that had been stress points for centuries. The human refusal hadn't just challenged the tribute system. It had provided a rallying point for every species that had ever questioned whether paying protection money to galactic bullies was really the best path to peace and prosperity. Chairman Vexstar made one final attempt to regain control of the situation. These unauthorized communications and negotiations violate established council protocols. Any species engaging in separate agreements outside official channels will face immediate sanctions and possible expulsion from galactic trade networks. Carter stepped forward again, her voice carrying the same quiet confidence that had started this entire confrontation. Chairman, you keep talking about protocols and established procedures as if they're laws of nature that can't be changed. But every protocol was created by someone, and if it's not working anymore, it can be changed by someone else. She gestured toward the junior species representatives who were still standing in defiance of council authority. Look around this chamber. Half the species in this room are ready to try something new because what you're offering isn't working for them anymore. You can threaten sanctions and expulsion all you want, but what good are those threats if half the galaxy decides to ignore them? The truth of her words was becoming apparent as more junior species representatives stood to voice their support for renegotiating the fundamental structures of galactic civilization. The Vorthak delegate announced that bioengineering colonies were prepared to share medical innovations freely with any species willing to reciprocate. The Draconi representative offered cultural exchange programs that would bypass council restrictions on artistic collaboration. Tucker's device chimed with another urgent message, and his eyes widened as he read it. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from 18 different star systems. Human merchants are being approached by representatives from junior species wanting to establish direct trade relationships outside council oversight. It's like someone opened floodgates that have been holding back 3 centuries of accumulated frustration. Morrison nodded grimly. They had started something that was now far beyond their ability to control, and the consequences could either transform galactic civilization or tear it apart completely. The next few hours would determine which outcome emerged from the chaos. Supreme Arbiter Tholanex rose from his throne with crystalline movements that suggested barely restrained violence. The senior council members will convene an emergency session to address these violations of established order. The consequences for species that participate in unauthorized agreements will be severe and immediate. But his threats rang hollow. In a chamber where representatives from dozens of species were openly discussing alternatives to a system that had kept them in servitude for centuries, The authority of the senior species was built on the assumption that junior species had no choice but to accept whatever terms were offered. That assumption was crumbling in real time. Carter watched the chaos around her with satisfaction mixed with concern. Changing a 300-year-old system was never going to be easy, and the transition period could be dangerous for everyone involved. But the alternative was accepting that entire civilizations should sacrifice their potential. To maintain the comfort of established powers, Representative Caldor approached the human delegation during a brief lull in the proceedings. Ambassador Carter, the Kaleri mining colonies would like to propose a formal partnership agreement with humanity. We offer our extraction technologies in exchange for your atmospheric processing innovations and mutual defense guarantees. Carter shook her head with a smile. Representative Caldor, partnerships work best when they involve more than just two parties. What if we proposed a multi-species cooperation agreement that includes everyone who wants to participate? The idea spread through the junior species delegations like wildfire. Within minutes, representatives were discussing the formation of what they began calling the Cooperative Alliance, a voluntary association of species, committed to mutual benefit rather than hierarchical tribute relationships. Chairman Vextar and Supreme Arbiter Tholenex watched their carefully maintained order dissolve into something unprecedented in galactic history. For 3 centuries, the senior species had maintained control by ensuring that junior species could never coordinate effectively or develop the confidence to challenge established authority. The human refusal had shattered both assumptions in a single session. Tucker received another communication and looked up with amazement. Ambassador, Earth Command is reporting that the Zalarian battlecruisers positioned around our fleet are powering down their weapons systems. Apparently, several Zalarian colony worlds are declaring their intention to join the Cooperative Alliance and are refusing to participate in military action against their potential partners. The revolution was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, reaching even into the senior species populations as colony worlds and outer systems began questioning whether their loyalty to ancient empires was worth sacrificing opportunities for genuine cooperation and shared prosperity. Carter stood in the center of the chamber watching galactic civilization transform itself around her. The single word that had started it all had grown into something much larger than anyone had imagined possible. The tribute system that had maintained order through oppression was giving way to something new, something that offered hope instead of resignation. Morrison joined her as the chamber continued to buzz with unprecedented activity. So what happens now? Carter smiled as she watched representatives from dozens of species working together to design new frameworks for galactic cooperation. Now we find out if the galaxy is ready to grow up. The Cooperative Alliance would face challenges and setbacks. In the months and years ahead, the senior species would not give up their privileges without resistance. There would be conflicts and compromises and moments when the entire experiment seemed doomed to failure, but for the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy was moving forward instead of standing still. Species that had been resigned to permanent servitude were discovering that they had choices they had never imagined. Innovation was being rewarded instead of suppressed. Young civilizations were being encouraged to reach their potential instead of being crippled at birth, and it had all started with a human ambassador who refused to accept that things had to be the way they had always been. The tribute demand had been met with a single word that changed everything, and that word had grown into a movement that would reshape the galaxy forever. Carter looked out through the chamber's observation windows at the stars beyond, knowing that humanity had finally found its place among them, not as a subject species paying tribute to its betters, but as an equal partner in building something better than what had come before.